Hello and happy Women's History Month. My name is Brittany Baker. I am the Manager of Marketing and Communications at the National Alliance for Public Charter Schools. Thank you for tuning in today as we are celebrating women in education. It is my pleasure to introduce an inspirational school leader. Joining us today, we have Ms. Roblin Webb. She is the founder and CEO of Freedom Preparatory Academy Charter Schools, located in Memphis, Tennessee, serving students through pre-K up to the 12th grade. Thank you so much for joining us today, Roblin. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. We're so excited to chat with you today. So not only are you an educator, a CEO, but you are also an education lawyer. What inspires you to transition from practicing law to opening a school?
So it's interesting. When I left the practice of law, I ended up working for an education nonprofit called New Leaders for New Schools. And the reason I somewhat transitioned, really my life story and my life's work has been about civil rights. And so I wanted to do more for my people. While I was working for New Leaders for New Schools, I volunteered to coach a mock trial team at a local high school in Memphis. And the interesting part about it was that, one, I fell in love with working with the kids. It was also one of the first times that the kids had met someone that was an attorney that looked like them, spoke like them. They'd never really been exposed to Black female attorneys. But what was so disheartening to me was that although the kids were passing the state exam with flying colors, their ACT scores were too low to get them into four-year colleges. And so it was eye-opening to me that we were kind of fooling our families and fooling our people in Memphis to believe that their kids were actually prepared to go to college and prepared to have life choices. And so that's really what transitioned me into wanting to form Freedom Prep. At the time, I had no intention of wanting to run a school, open a school. I saw what school leaders, with the program with New Leaders, actually recruited school principals to turn around failing schools. I saw what those school leaders went through. And I said, there's no way I wanted to, there's no way I wanted to run a school. But of course, as fate would have it, I applied for a program called Building Excellent Schools after I had that experience with the mock trial team that trained professionals, whether or not they were traditional educators or not, to open and run high performing college prep charter schools. And so then I did the Building Excellent Schools program and then founded the first Freedom Prep school in the fall of 2009.
Oh, wow. I'm so glad you filled out that application.
And it was a friend sent it to me, and I was like, yeah, a friend said, this looks like you. I was like, yeah, no, I have no interest in doing this. And then a week later, barely a week later, I was on a plane to Boston to interview for the fellowship. So yeah.
Wow. A part of Freedom Prep's vision is to carry the torch of the civil rights movement and to help realize its dream. What does that look like for educators and students?
Yeah, the vision that I see, and this is my favorite part of the year, is senior signing day. And so for some reason, like graduation doesn't make me cry, but senior signing day makes me cry every single year. It is just so powerful to see Black and brown children walking across that stage and holding the pennants of where they're going to college, where they plan to go to college, and announcing where they're going to college. To me, that's just such a pivotal moment, one in a family's life, to see their child transition and go to college and go to higher education and have different opportunities in life. And so for me, that is that pivotal moment where we've graduated at least 5 classes where 100% were accepted to four-year colleges and universities. And all of these were Black and brown children. 100% of these children were Black and brown. And so that in itself is a part of the civil rights movement, because we are creating opportunities to uplift Black and brown families in Memphis, Tennessee, in a community that is probably one of the poorest communities in Memphis. We're in Southwest Memphis in Westwood and Whitehaven. And that community is, I would say 90%, the kids that we serve are 90% African-American and 10% Latino speaking or Latinx students. And 100% of these kids are going to four-year colleges and universities. That in itself is just kind of my contribution to our civil rights movement and really uplifting our people.
One of your ultimate goals is to close the achievement gap in Memphis among students from marginalized communities. What has this journey been like for you so far? And what are some of your gains? And how has the charter school model helped you with this goal?
Yeah. Um, the journey has been challenging to say the least. So far more challenging than practicing law. I can say that. We have not closed the gaps. We've gotten closer. We've moved the needle, and we definitely moved the needle in the years prior to the pandemic. The pandemic, though, was catastrophic for us, to say the least. I mean, our kids, virtual learning did not work for our kids and our population, and we were set back so many years. In our first few years of operation, we had the highest growth scores in the state of Tennessee in math amongst middle schools. Huge achievement, but still our absolute scores were not where they needed to be because our kids had so far to grow. And so are we working to close the achievement gap? Yes, absolutely. Are we there? Not at all. We still have a lot of ways to go. I would say the charter school model helps in a number of ways, particularly because it just gives us the flexibility and autonomy to do what we need to do for our kids. So if we need to have an extended school day, we have an extended school day. If we need to have an extended school year, we have an extended school year. If we need to choose a math or a literacy curriculum that is different than what the state is sponsoring, then we can do that as well. If we there's certain autonomies I wish we had that we don't right now that would also help, but there are a lot of autonomies and there's a lot of flexibility we have. We can use our money in ways that best support the education and pushing of students. So I think having that charter school model helps significantly. What was the last part of your question? I think it was one other part that you were asking.
Um, and I think you pretty much answered it. Like, how has the charter school model impacted your goal as far as closing the achievement gap?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, you definitely answered. And you also, this next part you mentioned that you all have had 100% college acceptance rate for the past 5 years. So what factors do you think have contributed to that for your
Yeah.
seniors?
So number one, so the factor that has contributed to it and the factor that is being challenged right now is talent. Number one, teacher talent and leader talent. We have had in the past, prior to the pandemic, phenomenal talent, mission aligned adults that were super hardworking and were just there for kids. We were going to do whatever it took to make sure that our kids were successful and get to college. We wanted to, regardless of what was going on in their family circumstance, regardless of what was going on in their life, our goal was to ensure that they get to college. One of our core values is community. So as a community, we think of the family, we think of everyone around that child as the community, and we work together to ensure that the community works together to ensure that that child can get to college. That sole factor is really the talent that I had in the building. And I say it's a challenge now because, of course, it's all over the news. There's a teacher shortage. There is and it's disheartening to me because there is a lack of, I'm not sure where adults are in terms of educating children, but children haven't stopped being born and children still need to be educated. And so I don't know where we need to go in terms of educators, but we've got to get folks that still have that deep desire and deep mission alignment to ensure that our kids are successful, particularly post-pandemic when our kids are suffering more. They're suffering with mental health issues. They're suffering with just being behind academically because they were out of school for at least 2 years, sometimes more in some of our circumstances. And so really talent, I think, is the crux to success or challenges in educating our kids and really fulfilling our mission of closing that achievement gap.
And then let's transition and talk about more inspirational women. Who are some of the women in education who inspire you and why?
So it's an interesting question because there are women in education that inspire me, but I like to think of myself more of a civil rights movement leader versus an educator, because what I am doing is for civil rights, particularly across the South. So if I think about the women in education, that would be probably Mary McLeod Bethune, who was on my computer behind me. You'll see a picture of her on my computer behind me. And then Dr. Lorraine Monroe. But the woman that I always think about and I always try to relate to is interesting is Harriet Tubman. And I'm sure an educator has never really necessarily said that. And the reason I say that is because in the communities we serve, there have just been decades and decades of poor and mediocre education. And there have been just damaged relationships with families and parents in the education system in general. And so oftentimes when you bring in a charter, when you bring in a school that is doing something that is drastically different than what is happening in the community might fight you sometimes. So there are times, and there's times where parents honestly have not understood what was going on in their previous school. Their child comes to Freedom Prep and they start to struggle, and then a parent will pull the child out. And so the reason I say Harriet Tubman is because not only did she escape from slavery, but she constantly went back to bring others in. And oftentimes the educator, myself and other educators, we don't have to be educators. We have a lot of choices because we have college degrees, because we have graduate degrees. So we have decided to dedicate our lives to helping others and bringing them out of slavery, by really educating them and giving them the opportunities to go to college. And so that's why oftentimes in my mind, I think about Harriet Tubman, particularly when we have challenges with families and I'm like, this is what we would like to do. We want to partner with you. We have meetings with every single parent before our kids come in because we want them to understand that this is a partnership. This is a community. We are making sure that your child is successful and has every opportunity that they want in life. And I find Harriet Tubman was that type of woman that often went back to pull families out. And that's what I feel like a lot of our educators and myself are doing.
Wow, yes. What are your thoughts on how educators can continue to empower and support young women who want to pursue careers that may be dominated by males?
Yeah, it's interesting because you think of education as being dominated by women. At the top, it's not in any way, right? So there is a ton of women that are teachers, but women in principal roles, women in superintendent roles, women in like charter school leaders or CEOs, there are very few women. And I think I would share with women, oftentimes I share with women that the challenges for a woman are different. That oftentimes you're in an all males club, regardless of where you are, even being in the South, being in Memphis, Tennessee. Oftentimes the superintendents are men, the district leaders are men. And so I'm usually one of the few women in the room. I share with them the challenges are just challenges in leadership in general. So the things you have to get used to are, it is lonely in leadership. And so I would always share, make sure you get a mentor, an executive coach, all the people you need, a support team in a community around you that are not necessarily the people that you manage. That is a surprise that women often find when they're in leadership is really how lonely leadership is. And then I would also, I guess, have that community, but make sure that you lean on that community, that it's okay to lean on the community and it's okay to be vulnerable. Oftentimes as women, we think that stereotypically we have to act like men to be in charge and to be a certain way. And we have to not show who we are. I think our strength in being women is the vulnerability. I think our strength is the ability to have empathy for others and that we actually can utilize those things that are often seen as weaknesses as strengths as women leaders.
I love that. And what's the best career advice or life advice maybe that you've received from another woman?
Interesting. What is the best advice? I think the best advice would be, and I often tell other women leaders this, don't make a long-term decision on a short-term emotion. And so oftentimes, a lot of things happen every single day, particularly when you're running schools. Schools are living entities themselves. And that there is never a dull day. It's Monday after spring break, and I'm just waiting for a phone call. We're going to see what happens today. And so I often tell other leaders and women leaders, you are feeling a certain way in this moment, but don't ever make long-term decisions based on that short-term emotion. That has happened a lot. Post-pandemic, I've seen people say, I'm leaving education, I'm leaving this field, I'm leaving this, and it's tough, and it is more challenging. It's far more challenging than it was 10 years ago in general, but these are short-term feelings and short-term emotions, and they too will pass, and never make long-term decisions based on those short-term emotions.
Yes, you are giving us gems. So let's keep it going. What guidance would you share for women who aspire to practice law or become leaders in the education field?
Yeah, interesting. So if they aspire, so I only practiced law for a couple of years, so I would say that. And I acquired hundreds of thousands of dollars in student loan debt going to law school. The law degree and the experience was beyond worth it. The work that I did practicing law was beyond worth it and very applicable to the work that I do now. And going into education and being in education, my loans were forgiven through public service loan forgiveness. So I would say, if you aspire to go into law, decide why you want to go into law. I went into law because I wanted to do civil rights. What I realized was that education was truly the modern day civil rights movement, but the law degree helped me. But I often tell women, really decide why you want to go to law school or why you want to practice law, because it is expensive. It's a huge investment in time. The investment paid off for me, particularly in this field. And in education, I think it's the same question. And the bottom line question is, what is your why? Always have to go back to your why, because both fields are challenging. Education is particularly challenging now. And the only thing that grounds me and grounds others and will continue to ground you is your why. Why are you in this work? I'm in this work because I believe I was put here to do this work. That is my why. That is my passion. That's my mission. This is what I was put here, my purpose, what I was put here to do. But oftentimes in these fields are both really challenging fields. And I always ask people and remind people, what is your why? Why are you here? And that will continue to ground you and keep you in this work.
Yes, and definitely part of the reason that Freedom Prep is expanding is because of your why, your vision, and your passion towards this. And by the fall of next year, you all will be enrolling students in Birmingham, Alabama. So congratulations to you all. And can you tell us more about that, and what can we expect next from Freedom Prep?
Yeah, so Birmingham was a natural kind of growth of really the civil rights movement. And so when Freedom Prep had been doing well for a number of years, and we had been approached by a number of different states to expand. I always said no. I had no intention, of expanding. We have tons of work continuing, still have tons of work to do in Memphis, and operating multi-state is complex. However, I went to go visit some schools, actually in Montgomery and Birmingham. And being originally from the South, so I'm from a small town in Arkansas, Camden, Arkansas, about 10,000 people, actually, really small town in the South. And when I went to law school in New Jersey, swore I would never come back down South. I love the Northeast. I'd never come back down South. I didn't want anything to do with it. And of course, 20 plus years later, here I am. What that led me to believe in the work that I've done, and it led me to notice that the majority of children of color are in the South. When our ancestors were brought, when Africans were brought in slavery, they were brought to the South. Despite the Great Migration, still the majority of people of color, the majority of Black and brown children are still in the South. Yet the majority of investments in education reform are on the coast. And so I said to myself, if I'm going to continue to do this work and I'm going to continue to push and carry the torch of the civil rights movement, why would we not expand to transform education across the South to other states in the South? When I went to visit schools in Alabama, what I saw was just a bunch of adults who were working really hard, who were passionate and mission aligned about students, but they just didn't have the exposure to what was possible for kids. When I went through the Building Excellent Schools Fellowship, the benefit of that was that I was able to visit schools in the Northeast that had the same population of kids that we have, but 100% of their kids were going to college. I was exposed to the curriculum that they use, to the way that they operate their schools, to the way that their culture ran in their schools. What I noticed in Alabama is just a lack of exposure, really hardworking adults, but not exposure to what's possible. And so it opened up my eyes to say, we can do this. We don't only have to do this in Memphis, but we can do this across the South and really continue the civil rights movement by ensuring that all of our children are educated at the highest levels possible. And so they have opportunities in life. And so that was really kind of the inspiration for, okay, we're going to go to Alabama. And what's next for Freedom Prep? I'm not sure. We have talked to other states in the South. We've still got work to do in Memphis. We will open in Birmingham in the fall of 2024. Really excited about opening in Birmingham and continuing kind of this movement in the South for Black and Brown children. And we will look at other states as we go along.
Yes, well, we're definitely going to follow your progress and definitely check back in with you to see how the grand opening goes. How can people who are watching, how can they help support your schools?
Oh, send talent. That's number one. I know people often are saying, raise money. No, send talent. We need talented, mission-aligned, passionate adults that are ready to work for children in our community. That is the number one thing now. Tell folks about Freedom Prep. Tell them about the movement and the work that we're trying to do, and tell them to join our team in all different capacities. We need teachers. We need school leaders. We need operations leaders. We need finance leaders. So send talent to Freedom Prep from all parts of the country to come join our movement.
Roblin, it was a pleasure chatting with you today. Thank you for joining us. Roblin Webb, the founder and CEO of Freedom Preparatory Academy Charter Schools in Memphis, Tennessee. I'm Brittany Baker, and on behalf of the National Alliance for Public Charter Schools, happy Women's History Month, and thank you for watching.